Every morning, just before dawn, I walk out to the back corner of my garden and run my hand over a simple pile of smooth, dark river stones sitting in a shallow earth trench. The surrounding air is completely dry, and the surface soil a few feet away is baked hard. Yet the stones under my hand are slick with fresh moisture. Small droplets are actively gathering on the underside of these rocks and sliding directly down into the deep root zones of the vegetable beds planted right beside them. There are no hidden irrigation lines buried in the earth and no sprinkler systems running on a timer. What you are looking at is a forgotten piece of structural engineering that captures infinite water for roughly a $20 investment in raw materials. Instead of buying expensive plastic pumps or struggling with utility bills, we are using the simple thermal mass of common rock to pull condensation straight out of the atmosphere. I have raised my family on the food from this back garden for 3 decades, and I rely on this exact setup because it is a physical certainty, not a gamble. It works by forcing a sharp temperature drop exactly where the ambient air meets the soil surface. In our time together today, I am going to show you the measurable physics behind this daily condensation cycle. I will walk you through the precise layout, the specific types of stone to source locally, and the exact angles you need to dig so you can build this permanent passive water system in your own garden. More than 2,000 years ago, an entire civilization thrived in one of the most punishing deserts on Earth. Not by finding hidden rivers, but by mastering the temperature of stones, the Nabatean people built their empire in lush agricultural terraces around the ancient city of Petra, despite receiving almost no measurable rainfall. They did not have deep drilling rigs or electric pumps. They survived because they understood exactly how heat moves through different materials. They watched the daily weather cycle and noticed a distinct physical sequence. During the day, the intense sun baked the terrain, but as soon as the sun set, the desert air cooled rapidly. They began intentionally gathering and stacking specific types of dense stone into deliberate mounds around the base of their vines and fruit trees. These stone piles acted as thermal traps. Because rock sheds heat much faster than the surrounding earth, the stones became freezing cold as midnight approached. When the invisible humidity carried by that night wind drifted across the desert floor and collided with these chilled stones, the moisture had nowhere else to go. It immediately condensed from a gas into heavy liquid droplets. This water gathered on the underside of the rocks and dripped steadily down into the soil. As dawn broke, the top layers of the stone heated up again, but that same rock canopy now acted as a physical shield, preventing the brutal morning sun from evaporating the fresh water trapped in the earth below. The entire survival of their civilization was engineered on this simple, reliable drop in temperature. They proved that heavy liquid water is always suspended in the air right above our heads, and pulling it down to the roots is just a matter of putting the right cold surface in its path. We do not have to rely solely on ancient history to prove this concept, because modern agricultural science has rigorously tested it in some of the harshest farming conditions today. Agronomists working in arid regions like the high-altitude volcanic deserts of the Canary Islands and the dry plains of the Los Plateau have run controlled multi-year studies on this exact rock-to-soil thermal dynamic. The data they published is definitive, and it mirrors exactly what I measure with a simple moisture probe in my own back garden. When researchers covered the soil surface surrounding crop roots with a structured layer of gravel and smooth stones, they recorded a massive and permanent shift in water retention. The stone layer essentially acts as a one-way physical valve for moisture. The studies proved that during the hot daylight hours, the rock shield blocks direct solar radiation and aggressive dry winds, which cuts surface soil evaporation by up to 40% compared to exposed bare earth. But the most vital measurements were taken after the sun went down. Instrumentation placed directly under the stones recorded that atmospheric condensation alone was contributing the equivalent of several inches of rainfall over a single dry season. The chilled stones literally squeezed the ambient humidity out of the night air, adding measurable liquid volume to the deep soil profile night after night. In my own garden beds, when we go 3 or 4 weeks without a drop of rain in late August, the exposed soil rows dry out and turn into dust down to 6 inches deep. But when I walk over to my condensation trenches and pull back the dark river stones, the topsoil underneath is heavy, clumping together in my hands and consistently registering high moisture levels on my analog meters. The science is completely settled and verifiable. By simply altering the physical material resting above the root zone with a $20 investment, you drastically change the microclimate, turning a baking patch of earth into a self-watering, moisture-retaining sink that actively pulls water from the sky. To understand exactly how this works in your own soil, we have to look at the invisible weight of the air right above it. Even on the driest summer afternoon, when the dust kicks up under your boots, the atmosphere is holding a massive volume of suspended water. It is simply in a gaseous state, spread too thin for us to see or feel. You already know how this physics sequence operates. If you have ever set a glass of cold iced tea on your patio in July, within minutes the outside of that glass is dripping wet. The glass is not leaking. The freezing surface of the glass is physically stripping the invisible humidity right out of the warm summer air. We are building that exact same thermal reaction in the garden, just on a much larger scale using common rock. The stones we place around our plants act as the temperature trigger. Throughout the daylight hours, the stones absorb the solar heat, but the moment the sun drops below the horizon, the sequence reverses. Under a clear night sky, the earth radiates its heat back out into the atmosphere. Because dense rock transfers heat far differently than loose topsoil, the stones rapidly shed their warmth and become significantly colder than the surrounding night air. As the gentle night breezes push warm, moisture-laden air across your garden, that air collides with the chilled surface of the stones. When the temperature of the rock sits below a specific threshold called the dew point, a physical state change occurs. The air touching the stone cools instantly, shrinks, and loses its ability to hold water vapor. That invisible gas collapses into heavy physical drops of liquid water. This is not a theory. It is a strict mechanical reaction. As long as the stone is colder than the dew point of the ambient air, condensation will continually form on the surface, drop by drop, all night long. Once that heavy liquid condensation forms on the underside of the chilled stones, gravity simply takes over. The water droplets swell in the dark until they are too heavy to cling to the rock, falling directly onto the soil below. If this water dropped onto bare sun-baked earth, it would likely pool on the hard crust and evaporate as soon as the morning sun crested the trees. But because these stones are physically covering the ground, the soil underneath remains loose, cool, and highly porous. The earth acts exactly like a dry kitchen sponge. As the water hits the surface, it does not run off. It is immediately pulled downward through the soil profile by capillary action. It travels down past the top inch of soil, moving steadily into the deep root zones of your vegetable beds or fruit trees. By the time the sun rises and the air temperature spikes, the stones heat up again, but their physical mass now works as a defensive barrier. They block the direct sunlight and shield the soil from the hot, dry winds that normally strip moisture from the ground. The water we harvested from the night air is now securely trapped deep in the earth. The root systems of your plants are incredibly sensitive to these underground moisture pockets. Over a few weeks, the roots will naturally migrate toward these damp, cool trenches beneath the stones, developing a dense network exactly where the fresh water is delivered every single morning. You are essentially creating an isolated, self-sustaining microclimate right below the soil line. You do not need to understand complex thermodynamics to see the results when you pull up a thriving plant during a drought. You only need a shovel and a clear understanding of how to arrange the raw materials. Now that we know exactly how the physics generate and trap the water, we can gather the specific supplies needed to build the actual infrastructure in your garden. To build this system in your own back garden, you only need to gather a few specific materials that will cost you less than a $20 note at any local landscape supply yard. The entire engine of this atmospheric water generator relies on the type of stone you choose. So you must select rocks that have the correct thermal mass and surface area. You are looking for smooth, dark, non-porous rocks. Dark river rocks or smooth basalt are perfect because their dark color absorbs solar heat efficiently during the day, which creates a massive temperature swing when they rapidly cool off at night. Do not buy light-colored limestone or highly porous pumice because those materials either reflect too much sunlight or absorb the condensation directly into their own internal structure, instead of letting it drip down into your soil. When you drive down to the supply yard, tell the operator you need a small load of stones, roughly the size of a golf ball, up to the size of your fist. This specific size range is critical. If the stones are too small, like pea gravel, they pack together too tightly and choke off the airflow, meaning the warm night wind cannot circulate through the gaps to deliver the moisture. If the stones are too large, you lose the concentrated surface area required to force heavy condensation. For a standard back garden vegetable bed, or a few fruit trees, 3 or 4 heavy canvas bags of these river stones are all you need to get started. You do not need any plastic pipes, synthetic fabrics, or mechanical valves. Just grab a standard steel spade from your garage. Bring your stones over to the dry earth where you intend to plant, and we can begin shaping the actual earthworks that will hold this permanent watering system together. Take your spade and walk out to the exact spot where you intend to plant your vegetable seedlings, or where your existing fruit trees are rooted. You are not going to simply pile the stones on top of flat, hard-baked earth, because the harvested water needs a physical basin to gather and sink into the root zone. Begin by carving out a shallow trench in a wide ring around the base of the plant. You want to dig down roughly 4 inches into the topsoil, extending the outer edge of this ring out to the drip line, which is the area directly under the widest branches of your tree or the full spread of your mature vegetable plant. As you remove this earth, angle the bottom of the trench so it slopes gently inward toward the main stem. This specific slope relies on simple gravity to ensure that every heavy drop of condensation that falls from the rocks will naturally run directly toward the deepest taproots rather than pooling at the edges. Once your shallow earthwork is shaped, take the dark river stones you gathered from the supply yard and begin laying them into the basin. Do not just dump them from the bag in a messy pile. Place them by hand so they form an even layer across the bare earth. You want to build this rock layer to a thickness of about 3 inches, stacking the stones loosely on top of one another. It is crucial to leave small, natural air gaps between the rocks as you arrange them. These empty pockets are the lungs of the entire system. When the cool night wind pushes across your garden, it needs to flow freely through those gaps, circulating the invisible atmospheric moisture directly against the freezing surfaces of the inner stones. If you pack the trench with fine soil or sand, you block the wind and ruin the thermal reaction. As you place the final stones flush with the surrounding ground level, you have successfully built a permanent passive water trap. The entire assembly sits neatly in the earth, completely out of the way of your lawnmower or wheelbarrow, quietly waiting for the sun to set so the physics can take over. Once your stones are set in the earth, the system runs completely on its own. But it is not something you can just bury and forget for a decade. Over the 30 years I have been working this soil, I have learned that natural systems require observation. And this thermal water trap has one critical vulnerability. The entire engine relies on those empty air pockets between the dark river rocks. As the seasons change, autumn winds will inevitably blow dry leaves, pine needles, and loose topsoil across your garden. If that organic debris settles into the trench and rots down between the stones, it acts like a thick blanket. It will completely choke off the wind circulation and insulate the rocks, preventing that sharp nighttime temperature drop. When the air cannot touch the cold stone, the condensation stops entirely, and your $20 water generator turns back into a regular pile of gravel. To prevent this, your maintenance schedule is incredibly simple, requiring only 10 minutes of your time twice a year. In late autumn, after the trees are bare, and again in early spring before the planting season begins, take a stiff-bristled push broom or a standard leaf blower and clear the surface of your stone trenches. If you notice that heavy rains have washed mud into the basin over the summer, do not just leave it there. Every 4 to 5 years, you will need to put your gloves on, pull those stones out of the trench, and pile them on a tarp. Take your spade and scrape out the accumulated earth to reestablish that clean, 4-inch deep basin. Give the stones a quick spray with your garden hose to wash the mud off their surfaces and stack them right back into the trench. You are basically resetting the thermal mass. I have seen folks try to skip this step by laying down synthetic weed fabric underneath the rocks, assuming it will stop soil from mixing in. Do not make that mistake. Synthetic plastic fabrics block the capillary action of the soil, meaning the water will pool on top of the fabric and evaporate instead of sinking deep into the root zone where it belongs. Let the raw stone sit directly against the bare earth, keep the air gaps completely clear of debris, and the physics will continue pulling water from the sky for generations. When you step back and look at the completed trench, you are not looking at a miracle or some unproven garden hack. You are looking at applied physics that has kept agriculture alive in the harshest climates on Earth for thousands of years. By investing $20 in common riverstone and spending a single afternoon shaping the earth with a standard steel spade, you have permanently altered the microclimate of your back garden. The results are entirely verifiable and easily measured with a basic analog soil moisture probe. Within the first month of establishing these stone basins, you will notice a drastic reduction in how often you need to drag a heavy rubber hose across the lawn. Your monthly water bill will drop because you are no longer paying a utility company to compensate for daily surface evaporation. Instead, you're capturing the invisible humidity that naturally drifts across your property every single night and funneling it directly into the deep tap roots of your crops. The plants themselves will show you the measurable difference. During late summer heat waves, when exposed topsoil turns to cracked dust and unprotected vegetables begin to wilt and drop their unripe fruit, the plants anchored in these condensation trenches remain upright, deep green, and actively producing. Their root systems are entirely insulated from the baking morning sun and consistently fed by the freezing stones directly above them. I have trusted this exact physical sequence to help feed my family for 3 decades because it does not rely on fragile plastic pumps, municipal water pressure, or mechanical valves that eventually snap in the sun. It relies entirely on the permanent, predictable laws of thermal mass, atmospheric condensation, and gravity. You just need to put the right dark stones in the earth, keep the air gaps completely clear of dead leaves, and let the nightly temperature drop do the heavy lifting for your garden year after year. If this ancient engineering has changed the way you look at the stones in your own back garden, please subscribe and like the channel. We are uncovering the forgotten physics that the modern world has overlooked. Let's cultivate a more resilient future together. The next hidden treasure of the earth will be revealed soon.